Welcome. If there's so much more to the Constitution than the Bill of Rights, where do we begin? Let's start again with Justice Scalia.
The Baker Brief with law professor John Baker. Your weekly dispatch from the battlefield of ideas.
The clip I used last week from Justice Scalia, we used about 6 minutes. I cut off the opening, which I'm going to now run for reasons that hopefully will become apparent. This clip is why he is concerned about civic education in this country.
I speak to students, especially law students, but also college students and even high school students, quite frequently about the Constitution, because I feel that we're not teaching it very well. I speak to law students from the best law schools, people presumably especially interested in the law, and I ask them, how many of you have read the Federalist Papers? And well, a lot of hands will go out. No, not just number 48 and the big ones. How many of you have read the Federalist Papers cover to cover? Never more than about 5%. And that is very sad. I mean, especially if you're interested in the Constitution. Here's a document that says what the framers of it thought they were doing. It's such a profound exposition of political science that it is studied in political science courses in Europe. And yet we have raised a generation of Americans who are not familiar with it.
Teaching the Constitution as it actually is written is a real challenge, simply because we've all been soaked for really more than 100 years in progressive education. And progressive education, like the whole progressive movement, is opposed to our actual Constitution. The emphasis on the Bill of Rights is to distract from the rest of the Constitution and make it seem like the Bill of Rights is the only thing important in the Constitution. But what do we have to do? Well, as Justice Scalia indicated, we have to get back and teach from what the framers of the text told us they were doing. Now, that's much better than some professor, whether it's me or anybody else, just giving their own opinion of what they would like it to be. It's very different. So progressive education based on pragmatism, and of course led by the famous John Dewey, has directed us educationally away from ordinary, established, traditional knowledge. And it is designed to be creative. Now, I'm not against creativity in teaching, as long as you can get the substance in. The difficulty here is that there has been a deliberate avoidance of the kind of substance that students really need to know about in studying the Constitution. And this is not just in grade school, high school, it's in law schools as well. As Justice Scalia indicated, very few law students have ever really read the Federalist. So the problem is what happened when progressivism got a hold of education. And it began seriously in the 1890s with John Dewey and others, really overthrowing at the lower levels of education, as we've seen already in higher education, the approach to knowledge and to learning. So I've got here a statement from the 1992 definition by the National Council of Social Studies, telling us what social studies is. And it says it's an integrated study of various things. What? Social sciences, humanities, to promote what? Our civic competence. But what does that mean? You would think it means knowledge, but really it's all about process. That's what identifies the progressive approach to education. Within the school program, it says social studies provides coordinated, systematic study drawing upon, and it lists a whole bunch of things. They're all great, and that mostly people study in college. Well, isn't the teacher then very well qualified to pick this out. Well, here's the problem. So many teachers have gotten a college degree in teacher education, which is almost only about process, not about the substance. There are exceptions, but I'm telling you what is overwhelmingly the case. So that many of the teachers simply don't have the competence in this area. They really don't. And then there is their reliance on the textbook. Well, who writes the textbooks? Surprise, surprise, progressives. So let me continue with that definition. The primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions. Well, if you don't know much about the Constitution, how are you going to make intelligent decisions in voting, for instance? For the public good, as a citizen of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an independent world, interdependent world. Well, wait a minute. You're expecting an awful lot without much education. That's what it really comes down to. Let me just tell you about my own experience. Some years ago, I asked the State Department of Education, where I was, Louisiana, to teach about the Federalist Papers because it was required by a statute. And I was told, well, we can talk about it, but we can't ask the students to read. I said, why not? So 2 reasons. Academic freedom. Wait a minute. Okay, so the teacher doesn't want to teach it. He or she doesn't have to teach it. Well, that was the whole point. Remember in an earlier program when I talked about the difference between academic freedom being only for the teacher in this country and not for the students? Don't the students have a right to learn? But here's the second reason they gave me. Too many students really can't read. Well, if that's that bad, which it is, then you've got much more fundamental problems. And if students can't read, they can't function as the kind of citizen we need who is voting. Well, it's no wonder then that recent polls show that roughly 40% of college students have a very favorable opinion of socialism. These are mostly people in the humanities and social sciences. Those opposed are largely in business. Well, of course, at least it's in their self-interest and they've got some common sense. But do they have the intellectual tools to combat the craziness that is coming out, and I've described in previous sessions, in terms of their education? It's not very hopeful on that front. But in the next program, I'm going to bring some of this together into a very practical thing having to do with the Bill of Rights, and showing you, I hope, that some issues in the Bill of Rights, like search and seizure, actually obscure fundamental issues that created the problems that sometimes are encountered. And of course, much has been in the news lately about the search of former President Trump's home. And at least people now are paying attention. And we'll turn to that issue next time.
To ensure your continued access to the Baker Brief, please note our additional channels listed below. And remember to like and subscribe using the bell icon.